Sanbonani, welcome to day 4 of the Poetry Africa Festival. I am Ongezwa Mbele and I'll be your host for this session, which is the book launch of Whistleblowing by Athol Williams. Hi, Athol.
Hi, Ongezwa. Wonderful to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. My first question for you is, can you please tell us who you are, where you're from, and what does poetry mean to you?
So Athol Williams from the Cape Flats in Cape Town, where I currently am. What poetry means to me? For me, perhaps two things. One, poetry is the place where I find my voice. It's the channel through which I'm able to express myself in an uncensored way. And I think in a world where everything or lots seems to be censored, where we are constrained in what we can say or do, for me, poetry provides the space where I feel none of those constraints. I feel I can say what I want to say in the way I want to say it. So that's the one thing importantly for me, what poetry represents for me. But secondly, I see poetry for me as the laboratory of ideas. It's where I go to explore ideas, to test ideas that I then take to my advocacy work or my activism work or even my academic work. So, and I think poetry is powerful in that respect. It's I see it as the place as an artist with their palette of different colors and experimenting with different shades and different strokes. For me, poetry provides that space. And so often, I'm not always searching for the perfect poem. I'm searching for the perfect idea that might come at the end of the poem. But I want to experiment in my poetry and try different things and push poetry in different ways to contribute to this experimentation.
Thank you for that. So can you please just unpack then what the book Whistleblowing is about? What idea are you exploring?
Ongezwa, the book has been written over 5 or 6 years. The poems in this collection have been written over that period. And it's a period in which I began reflecting quite in a focused way on the state of our society. I've written in the past, a lot of my poetry has been around social justice and social justice issues. But I think what happens is there's so many layers to the injustices we see, as we all know. And I think my poetry in the past was focused on that level of anger and frustration on the surface. I wanted to shout, and I think it was right for me to shout about what I was seeing. With Whistleblowing, I wanted to go a bit deeper and understand what is causing that anger, what is causing that suffering, what is causing that injustice. And I must tell you, it's disturbing when you go a bit deeper into what is causing the injustices in our society. But that's what I wanted to explore with this book. And it was brought to a head, as the title says, it was brought to a head when 2 years ago, I blew the whistle on state capture and my employer's involvement in state capture. Okay. And so the title is called Whistleblowing, talking to my whistleblowing on state capture. But more importantly, it's whistleblowing. It's me standing up and speaking out about the injustices that pervade our society that I think all of us should be blowing the whistle on.
Thank you for that. I want to just unpack this notion of rage that is justified. And where, I mean, what risk that you take when you start to go against your employer. How have you lived from then? What were the implications for you and your family when you stood up?
It's in a direct answer, simple answer, it's been devastating. My life has been devastated. I never expected the personal burden to be this great for standing up for truth in our country. and just some of those experiences. Firstly, you get a massive attack by lawyers, and the lawyers try to shut you down, to shut you up by threatening legal action, by getting you caught up in legal agreements. I was told I could never mention Bain and Company again, my employer. I was told I couldn't mention the name. I couldn't talk about my experience or I'd be sued. They reminded me that I'd signed confidentiality agreements, and the documents and information I had was legally privileged. And so firstly, they swamp you with all of this stuff that just causes panic. So for a long time, I just lived in fear at that point, not fear for my life, but fear of just the legal implications of what I'd done. So it creates a level of stress that you can't even imagine. Then you begin to look out for help. So you say, surely, because I've revealed hard evidence about state capture, surely I'm going to get help from government, I'm going to get help from NGOs, I'm going to get help from other companies. And to my absolute horror, there wasn't a single piece of help, right? There's no number, in South Africa today, there's no number you can call if you're a whistleblower or you've seen something illegal. We have those lines for Childline or other helplines. There's a single helpline. So you've spoken up, you realize suddenly you're in trouble. There's no help. So it adds another layer of stress. Then, because of the seriousness of what I was saying, Ongezwa, I implicated 39 people in my affidavit. These are powerful people. That includes our former president. This includes CEOs of prominent companies, multinational companies. So I had no legal support, not a single, not even one lawyer. Then, because of the weight of my testimony and my information, the Zondo Commission asked me to come and testify. So it raises the stress levels even more, right? I then had to take off work because in 2019, I had two jobs. I had a part-time job at Bain and I had a part-time job as a business ethics lecturer at UCT. Even UCT told me to resign because of they called this a distraction of what I was doing with state capture. So there I had no income. I had to prepare the 700-page affidavit on my own. Anyway, so I can keep going on, and you can imagine the heap of stress. No income, then your health starts deteriorating, right? Because just the mental stress of all of that. I'd never experienced depression in my life before, but I began to experience depression where I couldn't even get out of bed. And so it was for me this pinnacle moment of understanding the corruption and state capture and the complicity in our country, and how we all in many ways are complicit. Because I keep saying, not a single person started a petition for Athol. Not a single person said, hey, let's do a back a buddy thing for Athol. No one. So not government, not NGOs, not corporates, not individuals. I even said, I remember on Facebook saying, even my poet friends are silent. And so we see someone suffering, and I think we see this with the vulnerable Ongezwa. We see this with the poor. We see this with women who have survived gender-based violence. We walk past them and we say shame, but we walk past them. And that was my experience. It's heavy. It's heavy, but this is the reality.
Oh no! I mean, what you highlight so beautifully and with such conviction is the fact that here we are in South Africa, a democratic country, and at this point where there's this movement to stop corruption, but there is no protection for citizens when they hold the powerful people accountable, right?
Yeah. I think it makes a mockery. Sorry to interrupt you. I think it makes a mockery of our statements, even our president saying, we should help and support whistleblowers. And when our president says that, and you don't get a phone call from the president or his office the next day, it's a mockery. And now I think it's become fashionable to talk about supporting whistleblowers. I have not had a single, and all the other whistleblowers as well who I speak to, no one's called to say to help. I've got no security help. I paid for my own travel when I went to the Zondo Commission, right? So it's for me, this talk about fighting corruption is a sham.
Thank you for your truth. Oh, I felt that.
Thank you.
Can you please read the poem, The Whistleblower's Wife?
Yes. I think that captures part of this discussion we've just been having beautifully. Whistleblower's wife. Hello, sniper, she says, opening curtains to another bunker day. She scans the muscular buildings outside, their square eyes leering, and the lurching stinkwoods, menacing arms and fingers gyrating, camouflaging her fears. She knows there are suits plotting his silence, now that he's declared to carry truth on his tongue. His conscience gifted her this despair. How does he return her peace, thieved and offered for the common good? She has shrunken as their world tightened around them, a chokehold where they expected an embrace. Every creak gets her full attention, every door rattle, a defensive drill. The TV is silent, her laughter muted, heartbeat low. Yesterday, he tried to sprinkle sugar on her clouds with a surprise cake order for home delivery. A foolish, well-intentioned act, like holding a mirror to the sun to direct light into evil shadows, but just getting your hands burnt. She sent the delivery away and held him tight. Too risky. You're all the cake I need. How is it that those who dream of larger lives for all are confined to living the smallest? Why is it that those who stand up for freedom end up in captivity? These questions, not hers. She has things to do to keep their wheels turning. There probably is no sniper, but still she insists that he keeps away from the window.
Thank you. Thank you, Athol. Can you please repeat that line? How is it that we dream? Please.
Yeah. How is it that those who dream of larger lives for all are confined to living the smallest?
And what is your dream for South Africa?
Well, it certainly was larger lives, Ongezwa. The sense of, I see us as living often fearful lives. We are fearful. And I think everyone's fearful for different reasons. I think women are fearful to walk around at night because of danger to them. I think those who have are afraid of losing it. Those who don't have are afraid they'll never have it. I think we live in fear of violence all the time. We live in fear of starvation all the time. We are fearful, and I think what fear does is it shrinks you. It makes you a smaller human being, a smaller person, a smaller spirit. And so for me, the image is we are these tiny, squashed up beings. And my dream is that we become these larger lives, to live these larger lives, to walk around like children, waving our arms in the streets and doing somersaults because life is good. And that's I think what we have to dream for ourselves. And part of what I'm saying in the poem is the tragedy is that those who dream that and speak that actually end up living these small, tiny lives again.
Thank you. I mean, I'll go back to you made me reflect about just the moment of looting in South Africa, or KZN, right? And I'm from Wamashu. And now I stay in Glenwood, which is a semi-suburb near the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And I didn't know white people had guns. I mean, I know, but and those tensions of I pride myself. Because those tensions, that the double consciousness that happens with the structural apartheid of South Africa. So I get the cry of the limitation, because there is nothing. I understand also the dream of wanting people to reach their capacity, their fullest capacity and their fullest ability. Aren't we here to live like that?
Absolutely.
I'll read one comment.
Please.
Someone says, congratulations, Athol, on his book, The Fight Against Social Justice. It could not be easy to be a whistleblower in our times. It looks like laws has been written to appear smart, right? So when law, I mean, when the law doesn't serve, right?
Yes.
And be praised to have good laws, come implementation, it becomes do as I say, not as I do.
Thank you. That's a great comment.
It is. Roland says, beautiful poem. It's a pity that it had to be written.
Yeah.
Okay.
I sense that heaviness. When I look at the book, I'm quite an optimistic person. I'm quite a joyful person. And when I read through this book, there's a heaviness. And I share Roland's view that it's a pity it had to be written, but it has to be written. When there's injustice, we must speak about it. We must shine a light on it.
Yeah. I mean, also just to draw on South African events, which, I mean, we go back to, Fees Must Fall, when the young people were quite disappointed with how far we came, right? Those tensions. Yeah. So it is these, I mean, we've got democracy, but how just people are not served, right?
Yeah.
And we're still struggling in 2021 to really transform ourselves into, and so, and it is disappointing, but then there's a moment of, and I don't want to have toxic positivity, there's a moment of hope and encouragement when we see people like you unmuting themselves, right? When they speak, we are encouraged,
Yeah.
I wanna go back to, not go back, I keep on saying going back because I read the poem, I keep on going back. Some of the poems in the book have been already published in various platforms, right? And what was your reason to feature them?
A few reasons, I guess. One is they're beautiful poems which others have enjoyed, and I wanted to showcase them again. I think just a practical note, as poets, we build our brand and we build our reputation by getting our work published in credible literary journals. And so I think I've made it one of my tasks to keep doing that. I've had over 100 of my poems published in literary journals and anthologies because I want to share my work and I want to get feedback on my work. Including them in this anthology was, I think, because they fitted within what I wanted to say in this book, but also I think to showcase that the poems here are poems that have sort of stood the test of time in a way. They've been through the hands of other editors of journals, and it's sort of a stamp of approval in some sense. And that seems trite in a way, but I think that's how we build our brand and build our credibility.
Getting feedback.
Yeah, that's it's exactly. And it's one of those things where you say, how can people then know my work? And we've got different platforms. There's live platforms like this. There are platforms where you can read your work. Books is another way, and I think literary journals is another. And I think the more we as poets can cross-pollinate those platforms, mix them up, I think that's how we build our brand and build our voice. Because for me, it's about voice, ultimately. If I think I've got something to say, I need to make sure I've got the voice and the space to say it.
Thank you for that. I hope poets are listening, want to publish. That was good advice. Can you please read one of the poems that you prepared for us that has been published, and do say to us which journal it was published, so we can know about how to
yes, exactly. I'll read this one. It's called Bird Watching. It was published in New Coin in 2016, so 5 years ago. And it's right at the back of the book, but that doesn't mean it's relegated to the end of the book. It's one of my favorite poems. It is easy to watch from up here. I'm perched above the treetop, sunk into my first floor living room armchair, invisible to the opera of colorful figures performing like clockwork at the sun's drawing of curtains. I don't know the musical names they have inherited, but I know them as they know me. An odd character appears that unsettles the others and stirs in me a dark fear that lay dormant for centuries. Its name I know, a pied crow, large and shiny black, neck white-collared like an Afro-Asian slave wearing a metal shackle around his neck. I foolishly wonder if the crow hears the cries and dreams of forgotten fathers laboring through its veins as I hear in mine when my anger stills and I listen closely. The black intrusion blows away and I return to the tree in my garden that sings with the voices of those in little brown jackets or dark blue gowns, bright little yellow shirts, as the morning rays weave their way between strands of cloud and green-leafed branches to form a warm pool that swirls around joyfully on my chest.
Thank you. I mean, the image of the crow, right? Starts to bring the racial tensions through, but also the fact that the crow can fly, which also speaks to freedom of some sort. And you say, you know, the crow is shackled. And apparently crows, if someone can reflect like human beings, it's been discovered. That's the new, I think. I do make up stories in my mind.
Intelligence, yes. Yeah.
So it's an interesting image. I want us to go to, there's one poem which talks about, which is titled Goodbye Mandela. And this poem made me think about, it made me sow ideas, like you say, poetry starts to, you know, made me think about Sisonke Msimang's article, Rescuing Nelson Mandela from Sainthood, where she unpacks what her views are on Nelson Mandela in the present times. So if you can please read the poem and then unpack for us, what are your views of Nelson Mandela in the present times in relation to your book also?
Perfect, I'll do that, perfect. Goodbye, Mr. Mandela. We heard your words, Mr. Mandela. Never, never, and never again. Though filled with hope, they fell like death. Father, father, and father again. Daughter, daughter, and daughter again. Bullet, bullet, and bullet again. Hunger, hunger and hunger again, lying, lying and lying again, suffering, suffering and suffering again. We still hear these words, Mr. Mandela, never, never and never again. Only now they're not yours. Ongezwa, to your question of my view of Nelson Mandela and how he relates to our present situation and the book, I hold Nelson Mandela in extremely high regard as a leader who helped our country transition from apartheid through democracy. I don't think he's the saint that we often make him out to be. I think he had a pivotal role, a vital role, a massive role in guiding us and leading us through that transition. I think a role probably no one else could have played. I don't think there are many others. There might be a few, but not many who could have played that role. I think I specifically say he led us to democracy. I don't think he led us to freedom. And it depends on your view of democracy, but some would say democracy provides the platform upon which we then build our freedom. And so we could say, well, Mr. Mandela delivered the democracy, he did his part, now we must build the rest. And maybe that's true. But I think we call 27th of April Freedom Day. For me, it's Democracy Day. It's not Freedom Day because we are not free. We are not socially free. We are not economically free. Some would argue we're not even entirely politically free. So for me, he played this critical role in that transition. But now, more importantly for me, is that promise. The promise hasn't been delivered. And I think this is what the poem's addressing. It's saying that Mr. Mandela's generation and the generation of people leading our country today, right? So I see Cyril Ramaphosa and Jacob Zuma and all of them in the same generation. They made a promise, and that promise isn't being delivered. And it's like you said earlier, it's not about the laws, actually. It's not about the Constitution. We've got an amazing Constitution. It's about these very people who stood with Mr. Mandela and spoke those words who are now depriving us of that freedom. And so the suffering and the lying, this poem is saying, we hear that, right? We heard your words, it said never, never again would we suffer. And it was a lie in the context of you never delivering it. And so I think we've got a disease in our country of believing words and saying words are everything. Words are the start of something. The action must follow. And I think we've made it an art of just. I mean, look at the number of times our president says we will end gender-based violence, we will end corruption, and then nothing changes. So I think it's the same thing. I want you to challenge the words of Mr. Mandela, saying I'm not necessarily saying he lied when he spoke those words, but we as the recipients of those words feel a lie because we haven't seen the reality of it. And now I think a new generation is saying never, never, never again. It's not his words anymore. Now it's our words. And we are saying we're not going to stand for just those empty words anymore. We're not going to stand for these people telling us, to be all romantic about the change in our country. The truth is never, never again will we accept the suffering and the corruption that they are enabling. And we're going to take things into our own hands and create the future we believe we deserve.
Thank you. I mean, when the repetition in the poem made me think of how history repeats itself and how we don't learn, and also, I mean, with South Africa also, it's just I sense and that we are refusing to go back to the archives of the rest of Africa. We've got so much to learn. From mistakes that have been made, and also just triumphs and successes, right? And so this isolation of this country kind of perpetuates that notion of history repeating itself, with no consciousness and accountability, because I think it's inevitable history will repeat itself.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with the moments when the act of history is being repeated, especially when it comes to injustices, right?
Exactly. I think sorry, Ongezwa, to interrupt. I think it's exactly at that point where you see history repeating itself that we're at an inflection point, and then you're going to say, what are we going to do differently? I think what happened with the transition to democracy, we believed that our fathers had all the answers. And so we said, hey, those smart guys had the answers. We must just follow the path. And I think now we are saying, hey, those old guys didn't have all the answers. Sometimes the old guys actually fooled us. Sometimes the old guys were lying. And so we need to stop this thing from repeating itself, but we have to do something different. And I think that's often the hard thing.
Yeah. I mean, we were sent to the rainbow quite quickly, and our wounds are manifesting right now. And I mean, and the work is left for us to do, I guess, I think everyone at a certain point, and this is when I extend some sort of generosity of the complexity of situations, that, okay, you did what you needed to do for when you needed to do it, but then how do we engage that further? What I wanted to also engage about this country is, yesterday you were doing a reading, busy.
Yes.
And there was a poem which it's called Threesome South Africa. What is it called, Athol?
South African Threesome.
Please read that book. And also I have to give people a context, right? So I wake up, I'm like, because I know you're busy. So I wake up, I'm doing my research, I'm like, oh, controversial one. Already getting into trouble. Please read and tell us about the reading. How did it go and where you were at?
So what I did when I announced the book Whistleblowing, I offered to anyone who bought it before, pre-ordered it. Anyone who pre-ordered the book, I would do a dedicated reading with them. And so I honored that last night by those who had bought the book, pre-ordered the book. We said, we will have a session, a closed session just with us.
Okay.
And I read this poem. And what was nice about that group was that all of them had the book. So they had read the book and read some of the poems, or they could read it real time. And so they had views formed already of the poems. And there was sort of a view that this poem was an odd one in there. So let me read it, and then we can see how odd it might be.
Okay.
I don't think I have to explain to the adult audience what a threesome is, but this one's called South African Threesome. He's cocked, she's naked, I'm lying between them, stiff. But this is not how I dreamed it would be. He's on his side, cold and grim, with his potent pent-up package, waiting for me to finger his trigger. She is flat on her back, wide open on vibrate, her lights throbbing, brightening my bedroom abyss. This, my fearful romp, one bed friend preloaded, the other pre-dialed, hoping for no coming, except sleep.
I was still whistleblowing.
Exactly. It's exactly.
Please unpack. Well, and why now? Why are you being controversial?
No, well, okay. So this is what poetry must do, right? Poetry must say, what the fuck was that? And good. So I've got an interesting, in this talk last night, there was interesting reactions to it, because people kind of said, well, clearly you're talking about some wild, perverted sex party, and what's that got to do with whistleblowing and corruption and injustice? Why I'm calling it a South African threesome, I think we go to bed in a unique way in South Africa than anywhere else in the world. we lie in bed in fear. And he who is cocked, waiting for me to finger his trigger, is my gun. So there's this cold, grim gun that lies there. And not all of us have guns, but some of us have got panic buttons, and some of us have got remote controls on our alarms, and some of us know where the alarm and panic button is. And on the other side, we lie in bed with our cell phones, pre-dialed, on vibrate, throbbing, lights throbbing. And so it is perverse. I think we as South Africans live and go to bed in this perversity. So I wanted to create this perverse poem that played on this double meaning of it being the sexual act, but actually talked to the perversity of how we live. Ongezwa, you can't say I'm having a good night's sleep if I go to bed every night, with my gun on one end, my panic button, and my cell phone ready with 10 111s already pre-dialed in case someone breaks into my house. And so this is what I wanted to create, this perversity of the situation, but the perversity of the way we live. Now, what was interesting, someone last night said she interpreted this poem as, she said she went to bed, she used to sleep with her husband, her daughter slept between her husband and her. And so she was picturing the view of her daughter, kind of saying, the one end, this tension between the mother and father was playing out in the poem. For me, it's this tension playing out in how we have to live. If I think of this, right, I'm lying there, well, obviously it's not sexually stiff, but stiff in fear. So I like your frown. What is your reaction to that?
I mean, I'm just thinking, right? And I have to gather my thoughts. And I mean, this is the 4th book launch that I'm doing so far. And
wow.
3 it is. So I'm like, this to South African, is hard, right? It's hard. That's where I'm at, right? That's where I'm to South African, just the reflections that are coming out in the times.
Yes.
And it's people's truths and realities. And I'm still trying not to do that toxic positivity situation. Is what now? Yeah.
Now that's, I think for me, that was the point of shining a light on these injustices, on these social ills, is for each of us individually, Ongezwa, to answer that question, the what now? Because you're right, I didn't want the toxic positivity. I could have written pretty poems about skipping on the beach, and there's time for that. And I think we must focus on the beauty of our lives and the beauty of our country and the beauty of our people. But this is also reality. And so if I want us all to live those large lives we talked about earlier, we've got to acknowledge the things that make our lives small. And I think this fear is one of them. And so I've got to say, I want to live in a world where I can go to sleep without the panic button or gun and my cell phone pre-dialed onto the police's number. So what must I do to do that? And so it's this agency I want us to have. I want us to all walk away and say, we must do something. I must do something. And this has been my mission of saying, I want to speak up where I see corporate corruption, because where I am, I can do that. Others can do other areas. They're school teachers or they're parents or they're government workers. They've got different areas where they need to speak up and change the situation. And so I want us to be shocked and dismayed and depressed by the reality, because that must spur us into action then. Because if we think it's all lovely and pretty, we wouldn't do anything.
I want to read one comment. Gereng says, late President Mandela, who's our ancestor now, is surely turning in his grave of what this country has become. Corrupt leaders who loot indiscriminately, masses are living in squalor. We are sick we are a sick society that needs to heal.
Yeah.
And there's this relentless call. Thank you, Gereng. There's this relentless call for healing, right? So people are touching, and my and this is my question. I think healing becomes a manifestation of different manifestations for all of us, but a collective need, right? Of this woundedness. I mean, yesterday's poet touched on the woundedness of man. Which to weave the ideas, I mean, Frantz Fanon unpacks this notion of woundedness, how the colonized goes into the state of tension, dissonance of who they are and who they really are, you know? And I'm not doing justice, and this is in Wretched of the Earth, I'm not doing justice to it right now at the concept of the colonial woundedness. Letu Kwanyana says, lol, this poem is a whistle blow.
Nice.
That's just, I mean, I relate because that's how we live as South Africans.
I love that. That's a great review of the book. That should be in the back cover. Yeah.
Can you please read one or two poems that unpack some of the themes that you've spoken about?
Yeah, I'd love to just touch on a little bit of that woundedness and us looking for healing. And it's, you know, it's election time, so maybe it's good to talk about an election poem, because, you know, when we think about what we are asking for, what are people every day asking for? It's not ideals and philosophies. We've had the ideals and the philosophies. I think what the ideals and philosophies haven't delivered is just some of the basics of security and belonging. This poem says, all I really want is some rest. You can imagine, from all this tension and pain, all I want is some rest. And it's called Written Across a Ballot. And it makes some references to the poem by Mongane Wally Serote, Behold Mama Flowers. All I want, Mr. Promise Maker, is some rest. Just one night of restful sleep. I'll find my own mat and will roll up a sack for a pillow. I will find my own spot in the naked cold. All I ask of you is some rest, a restful night of sleep. There was a time I wanted to drink, to dance, to sing, but now all I want is some rest. There were days when I wanted to walk with ease, laugh and kiss with a giggle in my heart, but now all I want, Mrs. Oath Sayer, is a night of restful sleep. I don't mind corrupt leaders or absent police. I can endure the failing state, citizen neglect. I will ignore the rand or junk bond status, the price of data or bandwidth speed, or the brain drain, white privilege pain, black racist strain, who took what from whom for what untold gain. All I want, Mr. and Mrs. Hope Taker, is a night, just a night of sleep.
And I keep on needing to just calm myself down, right? Because I understand that, and I receive it. I mean, there's this, and how rest is also productivity.
Yes.
Because how do you go on to create, to dream this South Africa anew, or continue the work that has been done before, if you don't rest, right?
Yeah.
If you're constantly on a grind, if you constantly, you know, now I can't walk at night, you know, now I can, now I must check my back. Now as a woman, I must, my chest must be up because someone will attack me or sexual harass me, and that's the norm of this country.
Yeah.
What you do so well, and I think it's also what you do so well is the archiving of Facilitator, and because he was here in 2019, Poetry Africa. Was it 2019? It was 2019, it was not 2018.
Yes.
Yeah. He was here, and it's that moment of what these poems that I've been reviewing and engaging with through book launches. There's an intergenerational conversation that is happening that all poets are claiming, and the need to archive. Right, there's an urgency, and it's there, right there, and I think what social media has done for us in the digital era is, or the digital era, the shift is, our works can be archived. You can go back. What Poetry Africa is doing right now. So I wanted to touch on that, but also touch on the fact that rest is such an essential thing at this point. Also during COVID, people are tired. There's compassion fatigue. There is, activists are tired. There is, we exhausted.
We're overwhelmed, we're exhausted,
and overwhelmed. And now we need to vote also. And then also when people speak to us and asking us to vote, we are manipulated, right?
Yes.
So there's really no credibility in the work that the people that want us to vote for them.
No, it's exactly.
So for me, it's like, and there's also that fatigue to vote when there's so much that has happened for us to gain this privilege to vote, right? And how rest is needed and how rest is productivity. And thank you for that. I couldn't.
It's why I also felt that was important, Ongezwa, is if you listen to politicians, they seem to think they figured us out. So they talk about jobs and they talk about the economy and they talk about junk bond status and the rand and all these things. And for me, it just misses the mark entirely. Where what most of us really want is this living these large lives, is to have this rest, to have our strength back, to have our clarity back, to have hope. And that's where we're at. And yet the discussion is at a different level entirely. And our president thinks he can put on a nice colorful shirt and that sort of makes him one with us, when he still speaks completely past us. And I'm not just talking about the president, I'm talking about I think the general discourse is one where it's not talking to what we need, right? I think a lot of the way we've developed our society is we've just taken what we had. We've taken the old structural injustices and built new things on top of it. We've just inherited capitalism as it is from the West. We've just taken our ideas of ethics, our ideas of religion, our ideas of beauty from other parts of the world and just dropped it on here. And I think what we're going to do, this new generation of saying never, never again, is we've got to say, no, right? Let's understand what it means to be African. What does African leadership really mean? African leadership doesn't mean an African goes to the US to learn how to be a leader. It means something different, right? We've taken democracy. Now, democracy might work or might not work, but we've got philosophies here that have worked, and we are shy. We seem shy to bring them to the fore, right? And I think this is what Fanon was talking about, right? This is what Biko was talking about, is discovering our voice. It's not, like I say, us going over to the West and coming back here and saying we've got African ideas. We've got wisdom here. I was thinking recently, the idea of consensus and the Lekgotla is a powerful idea where we bring people along and we say we are sitting here until we get to consensus, right? Now that changes how political decisions or business decisions or family decisions are made. because then everyone is bought into it. Now we've got that wisdom here, right? You know, the leading authority, the world's leading authority on Ubuntu is a white American, right? Let me say that again. The world's leading authority on Ubuntu is a white American. I've got nothing wrong, no problem with him. He does amazing work. But the point is, we here don't know what we've got in terms of our riches. So we are learning all the other things. We're going to Harvard and everywhere else to learn what they're doing. We've got riches here in terms of wisdom, in terms of philosophy, in terms of politics, which I think we need to start saying all these things we've dropped on top of us to begin moving away and saying, who are we really, and discover that.
Thank you. Can you read a poem for us?
Oh, yes, I'll do a short one.
Thank you.
And perhaps I'll do a very short one. And maybe this one is a challenge, I think, to all of us. Sorry, let me just get this one is called Cradle of Mankind. I'm just going to find it.
Okay, while you find it, let me talk to the audience. I hope Nilana, please write comments and questions for us. Athol is here to engage us, and we are very grateful. Thank you.
So this one I wrote when I was at Nairock Sculpture Park, which is this beautiful sculpture park in the Cradle of Mankind. And it was this profound moment, this profound moment of Africanness, of saying, if this is really the cradle of our humanity, let me listen for wisdom. And what is interesting while you're there, there are still monkeys running around, right? And it sort of drew this contrast for me again of, you know, we've descended from the monkey and evolved from the monkey, and years supposedly happened. And we still see these monkeys running around. So yeah, I know in our country, monkeys are a controversial animal to talk about, but I don't steer away from it. So it's a very short poem, Cradle of Mankind. They say apes stood upright here to birth upright man. Strange, though all the apes are upright, many men remain bent.
Unpack that for us.
I think it's
this Africanness that you speak about.
I think
and
it's the sense
challenging us to do. Sorry.
It was somewhat in the context of gender-based violence. This idea of we talk about the cradle of mankind, we talk about human evolution, we talk about human greatness, and so it's the sense of how we've evolved beyond the basic animal, and we've stood upright, and we are moral beings, and yet our behavior doesn't reflect that. And I was saying, yet, so we look at the monkey or the ape and say, well, we're more evolved than the ape because we're upright man. But I think in terms from a moral standpoint, you can always argue the ape is more upright morally than we are. And so I'm saying, well, we might be upright and the monkey's bent physically. Morally, you know, we're bent, they're upright because of the way we have behaved in our societies. We destroy the planet. Monkeys don't do that, right? The violence we impose on each other, we do that. Monkeys don't do that. So actually, it's offensive to the monkey to say that we've evolved from them because actually we've degraded. We're something lesser than what they are. And I think this idea of men walking around actually just being morally bent, I think is a powerful image for me, because it says it can still be straightened, right? We can still straighten our moral bentness, but again, it's got to be a choice we make and the effort we make to straighten that moral bentness, because it's the only way I can understand the violence which we dispense with so easily. It seems so easy to be violent, right? Towards women, towards other men, towards each other, the words we say, the actions we take, we are bent on violence. We seem bloodthirsty. And I think that's something which we definitely need to kind of undo in our social psyche.
Thank you, Athol. Again, there is a cry of living through the normalization of violence. You're not the first poet to speak about it. So, and also a cry for us to do better, to change, to do more work, to make more effort. And what you do, what you say is, it comes easy. You know, it comes easy for whatever reason. Some reasons we know, we don't have the time to unpack now.
Yeah.
We've come to the end of our session. But you need to tell us how much the book is.
Yeah.
Where can we get the book? You know?
So the book is 150 Rand. It's published by Gecko Publishing. I'm very honored that Gecko's published it. So geckopublishing.co.za is their website. And it's in exclusive books, some stores, and in Cape Town, a few of the independent stores.
Thank you, Athol. I will do the PR and then we'll do our goodbyes. PR for this festival, Poetry Africa 2021, has been made possible by various partners, and I'll just mention them, partners and funders: the University of KwaZulu-Natal, National Institute for Humanities and Social Science, French Institute of South Africa, Total Energies, KwaZulu-Natal Department of Arts and Culture. We have now reached our end of our session. Thank you so much, Athol Williams. The Whistleblowing by Athol Williams, and thank you for your wisdom. I'm sorry that you've gone through a hard time. I see you, I hear you, and we are here as much as we don't seem to be here. Yeah. And I wish you more support.
Thank you. Thank you, Ongezwa. Appreciate it.